A former beauty queen and Instagram model gunned down in broad daylight after posting her location on social media.
Anyone who lives a very public-facing internet life is more trackable than others.
So did her Instagram provide the killers with a map of her location?
Though it's not quite clear from a timing perspective why it happened after the post or if it really was that they were going based solely off of the posting behavior.
And was it a random attack or carried out by career criminals?
If nothing else, the public nature of her death would suggest that these are not common criminals.
The case takes yet another turn when we learn the one-time beauty queen had links to a known drug trafficker who she may have had an affair with.
So living a very public life, being connected to someone who's involved in overt criminal activity means that they might be at risk.
This is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues through their Incognito browser. If you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/LCnews. Here's everything we know about the murder of Landy Paraga that so far remains unsolved.
This seems like the kind of story that you might expect given the dynamics of the case. You've got someone who's linked with a cartel. They are in a relationship that appears to be extramarital, and so there's a lot of complications. You have someone who's living a very public life and is a potential target for violence, and so this makes some degree of sense on face.
That's Michigan State University professor Tom Holt, who teaches in the School of Criminal Justice. He's an expert in the field of cybersecurity and hitman behavior. But before we hear from his expertise, let's take a deep dive into the life of 23-year-old Landy Paraga. In 2022, she placed 5th in the Miss Ecuador beauty pageant, and more recently, she ran a sports clothing label. But she was also known for a massive Instagram following. At the time of her death, her follower count was about 173,000, and since her murder, that number has jumped to 183,000. Her popularity trickled over to TikTok too, where she currently sits at 1.2 million followers. Needless to say, a lot of eyes were on Landy. She was a well-known person. She has thousands of followers on Instagram. She had participated in beauty pageants before, so she's kind of a public figure. Does that make it easier for people to keep tabs on her whereabouts?
Certainly, anyone who lives a very public-facing internet life is more trackable than others. If you're checking into locations, if you're posting constantly about where you are or what you're eating, what you're doing, that definitely makes it easier to understand your daily patterns and your routines.
On Sunday, April 28th, Landy and her boyfriend visited a restaurant in Quevedo, Ecuador. Landy posted a picture of their meal to her Instagram story, showing octopus ceviche the restaurant is apparently known for. Minutes later, she was gunned down in broad daylight. So what do you make of that? Did she tip off her killers by posting her location?
It's difficult to say. Given the nature of the death, it seems as though I'm guessing that the individuals who performed this hit were most likely aware of her location or at least following her to some degree. I'd like to think that a cartel sponsored or at least potentially associated person would not be dependent on Instagram to know where a person is. It might be confirmatory, but given the dynamics of the incident itself, I imagine they probably knew where she was already, though it's not quite clear from a timing perspective why it happened after the post or if it really was that they were going based solely off of the posting behavior.
The moments leading up to Landy's death were caught on the restaurant's security camera video too. The video opens with Landy standing across from her boyfriend just talking. Seconds later, Landy appears to notice someone standing in the door. She looks over but quickly turns away. After that, authorities say 2 gunmen entered the restaurant and shot Landy 3 times. She died as a result of the attack. While Holt believes the attackers probably already knew Landy's location, even without her Instagram post, He says it's still important to consider social media's safety.
If you're someone where you have concerns about your personal safety, or you're in a relationship where there's potential for stalking or harassment, or you're in a situation where you feel some degree of discomfort about revealing kinds of personal information, I would encourage people not to post much on social media. I realize there's benefit to doing so, both socially and personally, but you have to weigh the costs and benefits of any kind of posting, particularly if you're at a point where you are receiving threatening emails, phone calls, whatever the case might be. If you're regularly posting about where you are and what you're doing, then that increases your risk for further targeting.
In the wake of Landy's murder, hidden secrets about her life have since been revealed. Now, if we're looking at the specifics of this case, and this is where it kind of gets into the nitty gritty, some of the reports I've seen say that she was linked to this known drug trafficker, Leandro Norero. And there was apparently this operation, it was called Metastasis. And that is where authorities conducted this investigation to find criminals accused of corrupting Ecuadorian state officials. My question mark here is, how would they have done something like that? Would it be through iCloud? How would that work?
There's a lot of different ways where we can collect information about individual networks. Some of that can come from the cloud, some of it can from Google Contacts. It depends on the degree to which the government is using kind of legitimate tools. Now, granted, the Ecuadorian government may have differential policies related to how information can be obtained. If we're thinking about it in a US context, as an example, if you arrest a suspect in a low level drug case and you're able to seize their phone and look at the contacts in there, you can get quite a lot of information. This is even true with, say, like a rental car. You would be amazed at the amount of information that can be derived from the infotainment system of a rental car, because people will just connect their device and they'll be getting texts, phone calls. You'll be able to track their location, their movements. So there's a lot of different pieces of information that can be gathered from various digital sources. It really just comes down to what is allowed under current government rules.
And apparently, through this investigation, is where they determined this known drug trafficker was having a relationship with the woman who was eventually killed, Landy. Apparently, according to some texts or messages, they had alluded to having an affair. Does that play into her death at all?
Potentially, it comes down to the relationship between the two of them and any other dynamics that may be influencing their behavior. So, living a very public life, being connected to someone who's involved in overt criminal activity means that they might be at risk. That person could be targeted by law enforcement for arrest and used as leverage to get information from the suspect. And so it makes it complicated where, yes, there's a possibility that this could have occurred because of their relationship.
According to reports, the information recovered via the criminal investigation showed pics of Landy on Leandro's phone and evidence he'd gifted her apartments and cars. But the real proof comes via Leandro Norero's messages. In one, he writes, quote, "My friend, her name cannot come out anywhere. Otherwise, my world will come crashing down." That message was apparently sent to Norero's accountant, and so is this one, quote, "If my wife comes across anything about her, I'm screwed." I've also seen some reports about speculation, really, that Leandro's wife may have gotten jealous or found out about this affair, and she was the one who put out the hit on Landy. Is that something that's possible?
Anything is possible in that regard, though it seems a bit extreme, almost like something out of a telenovela or out of an HBO series. It's the kind of thing that could happen, but is it necessarily the prerogative of the spouse to order such a hit, or is it more likely the individual in the relationship because of concerns that they may reveal information or that they could somehow be used against them at trial or criminal prosecution?
If it wasn't Leandro's wife who put out the hit, was it even a hit at all? Just generally looking at the case with the information as we have it, does it appear to you that there was a hit out on Landy?
It would certainly seem so. If nothing else, the public nature of her death would suggest that these are not common criminals. They were not trying to stage a scenario to make it look more like this was a robbery gone wrong or something else. To shoot a person, I believe it was three times in a restaurant, and have someone holding the door so the shooter can run out. That suggests something that is outside of the traditional kinds of criminal violence that we might expect and would be something more in line with a drug cartel or, any kind of organized crime group.
Leandro Norero was arrested after Operation Metastasis and was killed in a prison riot 18 months ago. Even still, Holt says his line of work could have played a role in Landy's murder. What would be a reason that they're looking to kill her, to take her out? I know we mentioned a couple of other things here, but could it all be related to the drug cartel?
That would be the most sensible thing based on the public reporting so far, that maybe she was viewed as a risk, that she would give information up. Perhaps her public behavior might lead to concerns about their operational safety. And so these are the most plausible things that I can immediately think of.
But there are still many unanswered questions in the case. What sort of things would you expect for the investigation moving forward?
There's a few different things. One would be if we wanted to really interrogate that relationship between the Instagram post and then the shooting itself. Were any accounts that these two individuals had created, or their personal accounts or otherwise, associated with the viewing of the post and then the time of the incident itself? The police could look at the cell phones or the devices of the shooters. Now, granted, there's going to be some difficulty in terms of identifying them if they were masked or in any way attempting to hide their identity. But there may be forensic material at the scene that could serve as a way to identify those individuals. So I think it's going to go through what we would think of as the traditional criminal justice process in terms of interrogating digital evidence as well as physical evidence on the scene.
In the end, Holt says the case itself should give us pause to consider some important issues.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, while this is a very extreme incident of violence, the very public nature of it, if nothing else, it does give us pause to consider our own behavior and think about what are we posting and where and why and how that might put us at risk as well. But beyond that, I think it speaks to the general issue of drug-related violence. We hear quite a bit about gang-related behavior and drug cartels engaging in violence in Mexico and on the border in the U.S. But it's important to consider all of Central and Latin America because of the influx of immigrants and the influx of drug problems in general and certain gangs into the United States, that there may be some spillover effects, that the Ecuadorian government is obviously doing the best it can to deal with the problems there. But the brazen nature of this incident speaks to a kind of broader problem of violence in the country.
At the time of Landy's murder, her finances were under investigation by the Attorney General's office in relation to cartel activity. However, she had never been charged. As of now, her murder remains unsolved and is still under investigation. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.